Marhaba, my name is Mais from Baghdad, Iraq. I'm a student at Al-Mustansariya University, Translation Department. I'll be reading Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, pages 474 to 482. So, I'll just start. As Ron ran to pull Hermione out of the wreckage, Harry took his chance. He leapt over an armchair and wrested the 3 wands from Draco's grip, pointed all of them at Greyback, and yelled, "Stupefy!" The werewolf was lifted off his feet by the triple spell, flew up to the ceiling, and then smashed to the ground. As Narcissa dragged Draco out of the way of further harm, Bellatrix sprang to her feet. Her hair flying as she brandished the silver knife, but Narcissa has directed her wand out of the doorway. "Dobby!" she screamed, and even Bellatrix froze. You dropped the chandelier?" The tiny elf trottled into the room. His shaking finger pointed at his old mistress. "You must not hurt Harry Potter," he squeaked. "Kill him, sissy!" shrieked Bellatrix, but there was another loud crack, and Narcissa's wand too flew into the air and landed on the other side of the room. "You dirty little monkey," bawled Bellatrix. "How dare you take a witch's wand? How dare you defy your masters?" "Dobby has no master," squeaked the elf. "Dobby is a free elf, and Dobby has come to save Harry Potter and his friends." Harry's scar was blending him with pain. Dimly he knew that they had moments, seconds before Voldemort was with them. "Ron, catch and go," he yelled, throwing one of the wands to him. Then he bent down to tug Griphook out from under the chandelier, hoisting the groaning goblin, who still clung to the sword, over one shoulder. Harry seized Dobby's hand and spun on the spot to separate. As he turned into darkness, he caught one last view of the drowning room, of the pale, frozen finger of Narcissa and Draco, of the streak of red that was Ron's hair, and a blur of flying silver as Bellatrix's knife flew across the room at the place where he was vanishing. Villenfleur, Shell Cottage, Villenfleurs. He had disappeared into the unknown. All he could do was repeat the name of the destination and hope that it would suffice to take him there. The pain in his forehead pierced him, and the weight of the goblin bore down upon him. He could feel the blade of Gryffindor's sword pumping against his back. Dobby's hand jerked in his. He wondered whether the elf was trying to take charge, to pull him into the right direction, and tried by squeezing his finger to indicate that was fine with him. And then they hit the solid earth and smelled sultry air. Harry fell to his knees, relinquished Dobby's hand, and attempted to lower Griphook gently to the ground. "Are you all right?" he said as the goblin steered, but Griphook merely whimpered. Harry squinted around through the darkness. There seemed to be a cottage a short way away under the wide starry sky, and he thought he saw movement outside it. "Dobby, is this Shell Cottage?" he whispered, clutching the 2 wands he had brought from Malfoy's, ready to fight if he needed to. "Have we come to the right place, Dobby?" He looked around. The little elf stood feet from him. "Dobby!" The elf swayed slightly, start reflected in his wide, shiny eyes. Together, he and Harry looked down at the silver hilt of the knife, protruding from the elf's heaving chest. "Dobby, no! Help!" Harry bawled toward the cottage, toward the people moving there. "Help!" He did not know or care whether they were wizards or muggles, friends or foes. All he cared about was that a dark stain was spreading across Dobby's front, and that he had stretched out his thin arms to Harry with a look of supplication. Harry caught him and laid him sideways on the cool grass. "Dobby, no! Don't die! Don't die!" The elf's eyes found him, and his lips trembled with the effort to form words. "Harry Potter." And then, with a little shudder, the elf became quite still, and his eyes were nothing more than great glassy orbs, sprinkled with light from the stars they could not see. Chapter 24. The Wand Maker. It was like sinking into an old nightmare. For an instant, Harry knelt again beside Dumbledore's body foot at the foot of the tallest tower at Hogwarts. But in reality he was staring at a tiny body curled upon the grass, pierced by Bellatrix's silver knife. Harry's voice was still saying, "Dobby, Dobby," even though he knew that the elf had gone where he could not call him back. After a minute or so he realized that they had, after all, come to the right place, for here were Beryl and Fleur, Dean and Lon gathering around him. As he knelt over the elf, "Hermione?" he said suddenly. "Where is she?" "Ron's taking her inside," said Bill. "She'll be all right." Harry looked back down at Dobby and stretched out a hand and pulled the sharp blade from the elf's body, then dragged off his own jacket and covered Dobby in it like a blanket. The sea was rushing against rocks somewhere nearly. Harry listened to it while the others talked, discussing matter in which he could not take no interest, making decisions. Dean carried the injured Griphook into the house, Fleur hurrying with them. Now Bill was making suggestion about burying the elf. Harry agreed without really knowing what he was saying. As he did so, he gazed down at the tiny body, and his scar prickled and burned. And in one part of his mind viewed it as its form the wrong end of long telescope. He saw Voldemort punishing those they had left behind at Malfoy's manor. His rage was dreadful, and yet Harry's grief for Dobby seemed to diminish it, so that it became a distant storm that reached Harry across a vast, silent ocean. "I want to do it properly," were the first word of which Harry was fully conscious of speaking. "Not by magic. Have you got a spade?" And shortly afterward he had set to work, alone, digging the grave in the place that Bill had shown him at the end of the garden, between bushes. He dug with kind of fury, relishing a manual work, glorying in the non-magic of it. For every drop of his sweat and every blister felt like a gift to the elf who had saved their lives. His scar burned, but he was the master of the pain. He felt it, yet was apart from it. He had learned control at last, learned to shut his mind to Voldemort. The very thing Dumbledore has wanted him to learn from Snape. Just as Voldemort had not been able to possess Harry while Harry was consumed with grief for Sirius, so his thought could not penetrate Harry now. While he mourned Dobby. Grief, it seemed, drove Voldemort out. Through Dumbledore, of course, would have said that it was love. On Harry dug deeper and deeper into the hard, cold earth, using his grief in sweat, denying the pain in his scar in the darkness, with nothing but the sound of his own breath and the rushing sea to keep him company. The things that had happened at the Malfoys returned to him. The things he had heard come back to him, and understanding blossomed in the darkness. The steady rhythm of his arm beat time with his thought. Hallows, Horcruxes, Hallows, Horcruxes. Yet he no longer burned with that mind, with that weird obsessive longing, loss, and fear. He snuffed it out. He felt as though he had been slapped awake again. Deeper and deeper, Harry sank into the grave. And he knew where Voldemort had been tonight, and whom he had killed in the topmost cell of Nurmengard, and why. And he thought of Wormtail, dead because of a small unconscious impulse of mercy. Dumbledore has foreseen that. How much more he had known! Harry lost track of time. He knew only that the darkness had lighting a few degrees when he was rejoined by Ron and Dean. "How's Hermione?" "Better," said Ron. "Fleur's looking after her." Harry had his retort ready for when they asked him why he had not simply created a perfect grave with his wand. But he did not need it. They jumped down into the hole, and he had made with spades of their own, and together they worked in silence until the hole seemed deep enough. Harry wrapped the elf more snugly in his jacket. Ron sat on the edge of the grave and stripped off his shoe and sock, which he placed upon the elf's bare feet. Dean produced a woollen hat, which Harry placed carefully upon Dobby's head, muffling his bat-like ears. We should close his eyes. Harry had not heard the others coming through the darkness. Bill was wearing a traveling cloak, Fleur a large white apron, from the pocket of which protruded a bottle of what Harry recognized to be Skilgrow. Hermione was wrapped in a bar dressing gown, pale and unsteady on her feet. Ron put an arm around her when she reached him. Lona, who was huddled in one of Fleur's coats, crouched down and placed her fingers tenderly upon each of the elf's eyelids, sliding them over his glassy stare. There, she said softly. Now he could be sleeping. Harry placed the elf into the grave, arranged his tiny limbs so that he might have been resting, then climbed out and gazed for the last time upon the little body. He forced himself not to break down as he remembered Dumbledore's funeral, and the rows and rows of golden chairs, and the Minister of Magic in the front row. The recitation of Dumbledore's achievement, the stateliness of white marble tomb. He felt that Dobby deserved just as grand a funeral, and yet here the elf lay between bushes in a roughly dug hole. I think we ought to say something, pimped up Lona. I'll go first, shall I? And as everybody looked at her and addressed the dead elf at the bottom of the grave. Thank you so much, Dobby, for rescuing me from that sailor. It's so unfair that you had to die when you were so good and brave. I'll always remember what you did for us. I hope you're happy now. She turned and looked expectantly at Ron, who cleared his throat and said in a thick voice, "Yeah, thanks, Dobby. Thanks," muttered Dean. Harry swallowed. Goodbye, Dobby, he said. It was all he could manage, but Lona had said it all for him. Bill raised his wand, and the pile of earth beside the grave rose up into the air and fell neatly upon it, a small reddish mound. Do you mind if I stay here a moment? He asked the others. They murmured words he did not catch. He felt gentle pat upon his back. And then they all tripped back toward the cottage, leaving Harry alone beside the elf. He looked around. There was a number of large white stones, smoothed by the sea, marking the edge of flower beds. He picked up one of the largest. He laid it pillow-like over the place where Dobby's head was now rested. He then felt in his pocket for a wand. There were two in there. He had lost track. He could not now remember whose wands these were. He seemed to remember wrenched from them out of someone's hand. He selected the shorter one of the two, which felt friendlier in his hand, and pointed it at the rock. Slowly, under his murmured instruction, deep cuts appeared upon the rock's surface. He knew that Hermione could have done it more neatly and probably more quickly, but he wanted to mark the spots as he had wanted to dug the grave. When Harry stood up again, the stone read, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." He looked down at his handiwork for a few more seconds. then walked away, his card still pickling a little, and his mind full of those things that had come to him in the grave, ideas that had taken shape in the darkness, ideas both fascinating and terrible. They were all sitting in the living room when he entered the little hall, their attention focused upon Bill, who was talking. The room was lighted, colored, pretty, with a small fire of dripwood burning brightly in the fireplace.
And cut.